So, welcome back everyone. My name's Damien, and we've been engaged in this conversation for the last few weeks. And so, just sitting here before everybody started to arrive, I was just looking at this, like the flow or the continuum of experience. This moment to moment flow of experience. One moment leads to the next moment, and pretty much with a cause and effect relationship, between each moment, just flowing into the next moment. So, if we just sit and, just to see that continuous flow of mental experience, sensation, even a lack of sensation, but a flow from moment to moment. And we can see that, what joins yesterday and today is this flow of consciousness, this flow of experience, this, each moment flowing into the next moment, and with a sort of a continuity of my awareness, a continuity of my experience. Not always the same, there's these factors that cause that experience to change, to shift, to increase, to decrease, to remain, to cease, and another one take its place. So even with all of that change in our experience, there is still this flow, or this continuum of my awareness, a continuum of my consciousness, and it joins me to yesterday, and it joins me to last week, it joins me to last year, it joins me to 20 years ago, it joins me right back to the moment of my birth. And similarly, that flow of experience or consciousness going forward, even if I become, really sick and mentally deteriorated, or in very bad shape, it's still that continuum of consciousness, a continuum of awareness, up to the moment of death. And similarly, from the moment of birth, or even if we say from the moment of conception, in maybe some very unaware state, but still a continuum of consciousness. So this is the foundation. If we really sort of get a grasp of that experience of that, all of my life experience is founded on this continuum of awareness. And so to postulate either at the time of death or even at the time of birth that there is no prior momentary cause for the consciousness, or no subsequent moment of consciousness after death. The postulating either of those two circumstances is actually against our day-to-day experience. Our day-to-day experience is that every moment is preceded by a moment of awareness, and there is a subsequent moment of awareness. And if we look at that, we see that is, we can say that is an absolute characteristic of my awareness, is this prior moment and subsequent moment. So this is the sort of the logical reason why we would then say that at the moment of our conception, that the consciousness that arises, whatever the first moment of the consciousness is of me in this life, whatever that first moment is, that similar to every other moment in my life, it must also have a prior moment of awareness. And similarly, at the moment of my death, in the same way that every other moment of awareness in my life had a subsequent moment, there must also be a subsequent moment at the time of death. So that's the sort of the logical presentation of why, for us, the evidence why it's reasonable to presume that there is a prior moment of consciousness before conception, and why there is a subsequent moment of consciousness after death. And, to actually accept that, the idea is that you contemplate that continuum of the consciousness and really establish that this is a logical consequence of really seeing the moment-to-moment flow of your own consciousness. So once we've come to that point where we think maybe there is some future embodiment, some future destination, some future existence of some type, we can then ask, I wonder if it has a cause. Like the basic question is, if like tomorrow, if I want to be happy tomorrow, is there a cause for that? Is there something I can do to actually be happy tomorrow, or to be happy in 5 minutes' time? If I say to you, okay, we're going to do a countdown in exactly 1 minute, I want you to create some happiness, and we watch the clock, and the minute's up, are you happy? That's a challenge for us. But we do have some idea how to do that. We have some sense of, what I might do to do that. If I say to you, in 1 minute's time, I want you to be really angry. And again, we have some idea of what we need to do to generate that. What's the countdown? 1 minute, We have some idea. So if we say in 1 week's time, in 10 years' time, can I be happy, or I will be happy? What do I need to do to be happy? Similarly, we can think, okay, well, let's imagine that my actions in this life will actually contribute to my circumstance in whatever this future existence is. in the same way that if I think I want to be happy tomorrow, and so we become quite convinced, or we can see that my actions today or my actions leading up to that point in time will determine whether or not I am happy tomorrow or not. You know, if I'm really aware of what makes me happy or what makes me angry, what makes me jealous, if we are really aware of that, we can avoid the things that disturb us, and we can cultivate the thinking and the actions which produce some happiness or some joy, some peace, some calm. We can create that. So in the same way that if we start to think, well, that's a truth for me right now, so I can presume that that is a truth for whatever my future existence will be. That my actions now will determine my experiences and my circumstances then, in the future. So I would say, you know, in the world you might say there's a lot of different philosophies. So many people, many people think, and I would say hope, that at the end of this life, that's it, finished, no future. And so, you know, the consequence of thinking that there is nothing beyond the time of death is that, not always, but in general, it means that a person may feel that there are no constraints on their behaviour. No constraints whatsoever, because there are no consequences. So historically that's called a nihilist view, that there is no cause and effect. There is no consequence. There is no prior existence, there is no future existence. But I would say that every religion, you know, the great religious teachers, and maybe also some what we might call humanist traditions, do assert that there is a connection between what I do in this life and whatever my future destination is. So, you know, and they lay it out, all of the major religions lay it out very clearly. If you do this and this, then, you know, and Buddhism also says at the end of this life there are two options. You go up or you go down. It's as simple as that. At the end of this life, your next life will either be better or it'll be worse. And that determination of that depends on your accumulation of habituations and actions, and the sort of the embedding of the consequences of your actions somehow into your being. You know, those consequences are sort of held. They are held in your being. And then when they meet the right circumstances, they will ripen and they will produce a result. So, if we think about this, you know, like from the Buddhist point of view, the idea is to think about this, and, you know, we are encouraged, in a way, to generate a sense of insecurity in the face of that. You know, and there is an insecurity because we have very little, and probably we actually have no direct proof of any of this. other than this logical, this sort of logical examination, the logical examination of the continuum from one moment to the next. Prior moment, the future moment, this continuum. If we really examine that with some logic, we can see that is a given for our existence. And so we can, on the basis of that, we can have some presumption that there will be something in the future. So then the insecurity comes as to, like we were saying last week, do I like this life? Yes, I like this life. This whole circumstance is, if I look around, this circumstance is a very precious and rare circumstance. With all of these circumstances that we have as humans in Melbourne, here, all of our circumstances are really quite precious. So it's reasonable then for us to develop a sense of insecurity, thinking, well, I like this. How do I get it again? Or how do I get something better? What is the risk of me having something much worse? And we can see, if we actually examine the ants, the dogs, the cats, the birds, the snakes, all the little creatures, if we actually examine them, we can see that they possess the wish to be happy and the wish to avoid suffering. We can see that. The tiniest ant, we can see it. If we breathe on them or whatever, you can see them scurrying in fear. These are things we can check. Insects, creatures, you get too close to them, you can see that they're worried. They want happiness and they're fearing the suffering. So, whether we accept it or not, this is the idea that all of these living beings have existence, a mind, a person, like a being, an existence, wanting happiness and wanting to be free from suffering, and to really see that I am the same. But right at the moment I have these fantastic circumstances. Compared to an ant or a snail or a slug or something, this is a fantastic circumstance. To really understand that your own existence is such a rare and special existence. But to not think that you are somehow completely separated from the existence that other sentient beings, sentient, having a mind, a being having an awareness, a mind. They have that existence, I have this existence. And the only difference is that somehow or other I have created the cause for this existence. So when we look forward, we should sort of, start to feel a little bit insecure if I'm not confident about what the actual causes are. If I don't know what the causes are for this life, how am I going to create a future life that is anything like this? And if I'm not actually putting those causes into practice, if I'm not actually accumulating the causes, then this will never happen again. And so we might start sort of praying fervently, I want to be a human, or whatever. But praying is of no use. So this is important to understand, that merely wishing for this to happen again is not enough. It comes down to the nuts and bolts. If I accumulate the causes of this, then in the future I will have this. If I accumulate the causes that prevent this, if I accumulate the causes for a much worse type of existence, then I will have that existence. So all of the major religions assert that point. All of them. And the guidance from all of those religions is, and there's a commonality, practice kindness, have love and compassion, avoid harming others. These are common aspects of every great religious founder, this assertion. And so Buddhism also, the Buddha laid out, he says, the basic cause of this human life, firstly is morality, not harming others. The abstinence of harming others, the avoidance of harming others. And then to create these circumstances, the practice of generosity creates a good environment, a good wealth, a good, facilities, everything comfortable and good. The practice of patience causes a circumstance where we are not surrounded by others wanting to harm us all the time. So, and also the others will see us as pleasant to be around. And also patience is the creator of good appearance. So these are all of the instructions from the Buddha. So, and this is the basis of Buddhist refuge, is this sense of insecurity about the future. If you actually convince yourself that there is a future destiny, a future existence, your continuum continues. Your continuum continues. And so that future existence, it has a cause. This is the sort of absolute foundation of life. This has a cause. My actions in this life have a consequence. That future existence will be caused by the accumulation of all of my actions. So the idea of Buddhist refuge is this idea that I seek to listen to the Buddha and then to try to put into practice the instructions that I understand, because I feel an insecurity about my future. If I don't create the causes, I will not experience the result. So this operation of cause and effect is really the fundamental building block of Dharma practice. So the teachings of the Buddha, let's say the Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha, but in particular, Dharma for me is the incorporation of the teachings of the Buddha into my own practice, into my own action. And so the fundamental reason to do that is this insecurity in the future, insecurity of my future existence, and a recognition that cause and effect is the way of creating the future that I want. There's just wishing for it, praying and wishing for it will not create it. Only by action, only by skillful action, morality, generosity, patience. These are sort of the fundamentals. So, my sort of topic for this month, I put under the banner of complacency, trying to overcome complacency. So, the reality, I think, is for us is that we go day to day without any consideration of these questions. We just live life. We live life by just a habituation of coffee in the morning, go to work, get my lunch, go to the gym, cook dinner, go out for a drink, go to sleep, wake up the next day, do it again, without any consideration of this aspect of our existence. And so that complacency, I think, is our greatest enemy. So we might, I might read my Dharma books and listen to Geshe Doga and, think that's... But the reality is that the day-to-day complacency, and your life is gone in a flash. So the only thing we can do is just repeatedly examine these questions, think about them, try to make a determination, even 1 moment a day of, a deliberate act of kindness, changing your natural disposition. Becoming aware of your natural disposition in a circumstance and then actually changing it, to an act of kindness, or changing it to an act of generosity, changing it to a conscious non-harmfulness, consciously altering your habituations. So that's the, they talk about mindfulness, which is, they say, in essence, mindfulness is memory. So it's knowing or remembering your state of mind. And then alertness is like a watchdog that checks whether that state of mindfulness is on the right object. And it's sort of like a judgmental thing, saying, the kindness that you're trying to generate here is weakening. It's disappearing, and it's being replaced by anger. And so the alertness sort of sees that, and then it triggers the mindfulness to go back onto the kind attitude. And then there's another aspect that they talk about, which is called conscientiousness. And conscientiousness is a deliberate sort of engaging of your mind into, for instance, love and compassion, so that you wake up in the morning with a determination to be kind to others, to have love and compassion, so that you try to hold love and compassion in every action that you do during the day. And you hold anger and jealousy at bay deliberately. So this aspect of this quality or this practice of conscientiousness is to deliberately hold your mind with a sort of love and compassion, kindness, affectionate warmth, a human warmth towards others. Deliberately you're holding that warmth, and in that process you're deliberately eliminating from your mind anger and jealousy and pride and competitiveness and arrogance on purpose. So that practice of conscientiousness is it's sort of like putting on armour. It's putting on the armour of love and compassion, preventing anger and jealousy and pride and strong attachment from arising deliberately, as a deliberate, aware action. So, mindfulness and alertness are primarily a consequence of developing your concentration. So in meditation, when we focus on the breathing or focus on the breath, like a consequence of that is that our mindfulness just arises. We become more mindful in every moment. Not just in the 5 minutes of the meditation, but in every moment of our experience, that mindfulness will start to increase. So we will do some meditation. Is anybody here for the very first time? Yeah, well, welcome. Good. Thanks for coming. Have you done some meditation before? Yeah, great. All right, so this is just going to be a very simple meditation where we're focusing on the breath. And in particular, we are holding like the awareness of the breath, not the physical sensation. Not the breath here in the abdomen, not the breath in the chest, or the nose, or the mouth, or coming in and out, but the awareness of the breath coming and going. So it's a mental object, and in our meditation, we often have the experience of me as the observer and the meditational object as sort of like here. Me as the observer, the object separate. And so we're encouraged to eliminate the gap between me as an observer and the meditational object and get rid of that gap to the point where my mind observing is like it dissolves into the object. It dissolves into the object. And there becomes not two things, not an observer and the object, but just my mind absorbed into the object of focus. So to do that, you have to get rid of all of the mental chatter and the sort of objectification of this process. So I think it involves a complete relaxation into the meditation. And so you eliminate this separation of your mind and the object as two separate things. So And if I say, try to do that, in a way, trying is about the worst thing you can do, because it's the trying that somehow prevents it from happening. So to somehow try to find within yourself the level of relaxation that enables you to just have your mind totally absorbed in the object. Okay, so let's meditate for a few minutes. So relax your concentration a little bit. And now we can do an analytical meditation. So from what I was saying earlier about the continuum of the mind, from one moment to the next and the future, just examine that question, or examine your own experience of that moment-to-moment existence. So just look at your own person, your own being, in using that, examining that, and then examining whether you think that's sufficient proof or sufficient reason to think that there is a future existence. So just using your own intelligence, your own analysis to look at this concept of moment-to-moment continuum, and whether that does project to show that there's a future existence. So just basically using your own intelligence to examine this question yourself. So just spend a couple of minutes, investigating that topic. And then, if I ask the question, this life, your actions, and a future existence, ask yourself, secure or not secure? That future destination. Secure or not secure? And just check, which do you think is the more prevalent circumstance? Okay, and then just bring your concentration back to the room. So we've got some time for questions or discussion, if anybody wants to share any thoughts or anything. Yeah, Paul.
Buddhism postulates that there's a finite number of consciousnesses around over the continuum. Where I'm going with that is the idea of if I have a prior existence, what's that one unit of feeling that's manifesting my current consciousness, and whatever it might be going forward. I'm also thinking about the ever-increasing population of creatures in the world. So how does Buddhism explain that?
So there's a couple of questions there. One is about a person's own consciousness. So So the question is whether it's multiple or single. So I'd say it's single, a single stream of consciousness. Now, that probably needs some qualification because, mind. So it's actually a major area of debate in the different Buddhist traditions, and then obviously with other philosophies as well, whether so I think the Hindu, one of the Hindu philosophies is interesting in that a person feels that their mind is unique and individual, but it's actually in the nature of a oneness of consciousness, and that the ignorance that we suffer from is not understanding that is a false separation. I'm just saying that as something to think about, that the individualizing that we do, from a Buddhist point of view, it is also false. But it's interesting, like the Hindu approach is that individualizing is not seeing the oneness with the universal consciousness. It's an interesting sort of complexity of thinking. Buddhism doesn't fully agree with that, but I think it's useful to understand this, how we individualize our consciousness. And it is individual because the causes that I create are experienced by me. I do not experience causes created by somebody else. And what the causes that I create are not experienced by somebody else. So there is an individualization of my mind. And I carry the cause and effect of my actions. Right? I carry the cause and effect of my actions. So there is a unique and individual mind stream of me. Now, from the Buddhist point of view, is that is beginningless. Like there is no point. There is no point where that continuum can be asserted to have started.
But you know what I'm getting at with it is the notion that there's a set number of consciousnesses in whatever the totality is called.
Yeah.
That may be a continuum going back
Forever.
But whatever that magic number is, 66.
So that magic number is called countless. Which and that apparently that term countless refers back to an ancient number in Indian mathematics. Countless.
Like infinity.
Not infinity. So countless. And my understanding is that it's 10 to the 60th.
But whatever it is, like there's some number.
But the important thing is that it's. But the important thing is that it is a number. It is a number. Whereas time is infinitely past. So time is infinitely past, but the actual number of consciousness streams is a number. It is a number. Very big number.
But somehow that's consistent with the idea there's an ever-increasing number of...
No, there is not an ever-increasing number of creatures. We have a very limited view of humans, humans being increasing. But, I saw, I think I mentioned this before, maybe last year I mentioned it, that scientists have recently altered the number of ants that they think are on the world from 10 to the 21, if you're mathematical, you are a bit mathematical, to 10 to the 24th or something. Okay, so it's 1,000-fold increase in the number of ants that they estimated are in the world. So for many years they've been saying there's this many ants, or they suddenly changed it by a factor of 1,000. Which is what did they miss? the whole of Europe and Africa and Asia or something. Anyway, but look. You don't want to get bogged down in all of these. These are sort of like superfluous questions. So the real question is, am I secure or am I not secure for my future? That's the fundamental question for us. Am I secure for my future? And and the only way we know is if we have accumulated enough causes for a good future, or whether we've accumulated enough causes for a really unsatisfactory future. We don't have to worry about how many other sentient beings. Yeah. It is a tad similar. I know we do not. I mean, we are hugely optimistic. Humans. We are hugely optimistic, and we do not want to think that anything other than an ideal future destination is possible. But we can check that out. We can look around and we can see how some humans, many creatures, have extremely unfortunate circumstances. Extremely unfortunate. No, they're even worse. So, whatever, and, but I think for us, I think we just have to see the variety of existence and see where we are now. And if we are convinced that there is some logical cause and effect process, then we have to accept that if I want this again, I have to accumulate the causes. So the alternative is for us to think that it's completely random, or that it's the whim of some superior being, or that it's dependent on some other external factor. And all of those postulations are depressing because they're outside of your control, right? So the one good thing about all this is that it's totally within your control. As challenging as that sounds, the good thing about this philosophy is that it is totally up to you. Totally. It's totally my responsibility. And unfortunately, there is a huge variety of living circumstances. Without using the H word. Carol.
It's the consciousness from the family history. Is it Buddhism? Do they believe that comes to your consciousness?
So the question is about the impact of your like parents and grandparents, etc. Yeah, I mean, this was a part of a discussion last week. the issue is my accumulation of causes and effects, right? Okay, and that then you say that is what produces my experience, right? But if I drink alcohol, I get drunk. And that my mind, my mental experience of that is affected. So there is a relationship between my experience and the physicality of my body, my genes, my cell, the physical. There is some connection. So there is a bit of a sort of an idea in Buddhism that if our parents are very angry people, that there's the possibility of that anger coming through to us as sort of like an inclination or a maybe some sort of impulse. That there is some genetic inheritance, maybe not on the absolute fundamental nature of our mind, but certainly in our behavioural conceptualizations and things, where we might be able to say that particular conceptualization or something it's the same as my father's, or it's the same as my mother's, So possibly there's some genetic thing at our behavioural level that can come through from our family history. And, I was reading, you may know about this, I was reading something about, apparently, after the Second World War, in Holland, there was a severe famine, or something like this, and that there's some, it lasted for several years after the Second War, some sort of real problem with food and starvation, and so that there is a trauma from that is apparently evident in the children from that generation. I don't know much about it, but it was referred to in an article that I read about inherited trauma. Sorry? Hunger Winter, is that what it's called? Yeah. And many years ago, before I got involved in Buddhism, I used to follow this author quite extensively, and I was thinking, he had this theory, he was a psychiatrist, he had this theory that as a psychiatrist, he felt he could see it, that in the human history, at some point there was such a catastrophe where only 1% of the population lived or whatever, but that trauma of that great destruction was still present in human beings today, which again is an interesting concept, that somehow that's inherited in the physicality that comes down. Now, how strong that is or not is another issue, but it is an interesting discussion as to whether traumas or some other sort of things are actually physically inherited. I'm not saying that that's important, but it's an interesting consideration. I would think it's just sort of like a minor experience or something, but not particularly a major. The thing that really affects us is our mental afflictions. The mental afflictions and our mental good qualities. So, anger, jealousy, pride, attachment, wrong view, superiority, arrogance, competitiveness, and then love and compassion, warm human affection, patience, generosity, joyfulness. They're the things that actually make a difference to us. So, yeah.
From a Buddhist perspective, would they make a distinction, like when you die, if you've got your consciousness continuing through,
of us end there, but there is a certain stream of consciousness that goes on?
Yeah.
Or what aspects of your
What goes on, what doesn't, yeah.
What aspects of your personality would you necessarily take into your next life, or would it just be your karma?
So the question is about what aspects of your personality or whatever would you carry on, and what gets left behind. I think it's worth examining within yourself, like to try to pinpoint characteristics, that you think might have come, certainly that you might have come from your parents, but also, the explanation for child prodigies, kids at 3 playing the piano or, picking up a violin and playing, is physical habituation to that from past lives, I was reading today about some genius kid with this mathematical ability, and again, I think you'd have to say that it's due to a carryover attribute from past lives, and maybe we can sort of examine that within ourselves. Your own attributes and what they might be. Now, I'm an engineer, and I think to a large degree I was born an engineer, and it's irrelevant whether I did engineering or not, but... So, what is that then? That habituation, what actually is it? So these are sort of things worth understanding, but again, a little bit maybe trivial in a way, All right, any other things? So let's just dedicate, to approach these questions, to really think about this, to decide, am I secure, am I not secure, and then to do something about that. To start to really think, how can I generate a secure future? This really is Dharma practice. Actually doing that, really to do that. So talking about it and thinking about it, that's very rare and precious. So imagine from everybody here, it takes the form of a ball of white light, and bring it above yourself and let it dissolve into you, completely filling your body and your mind, your body becoming completely filled with light, and your mind very clear and open. And then imagine giving this away to all of your, sharing it to all your loved ones, the people you know, and actually to all living beings. So visualizing all living beings in front of you. And giving them the benefit of this class. And then imagine that light returns and dissolves into yourself. And feel quite joyful. Okay, so thank you very much. Next week, I think it's John Wright will be doing the Monday night class. And there's a few other things coming up soon in the centre, which you can see on the notice boards. But thank you all very much for your attention, and, It's a two-way street, you know. So, thank you.